April 27, 1953. Wiltshire, England. A pale mist hangs over the grassy expanse of Porton Down, a fenced-off compound surrounded by silence and barbed wire. Inside, the morning smells faintly of disinfectant and damp stone. Beyond the gates, the countryside rolls on peacefully birdsong, a distant tractor, the illusion of normalcy. Inside, it is different. The air itself feels watched. Private Ronald Maddison, aged 20, walks down a corridor lined with white tiles. He has been told he is part of a common cold research program. His uniform is pressed, his boots polished, his face pale but calm. He signed the paper without reading much of it. There was a war on, after all. And he trusted the officers who said this would help protect Britain. A steel door hisses open. Behind it, a laboratory metal tables, glass cylinders, racks of labeled bottles, lewisite, sulfur mustard, sarin. Men in white coats move like ghosts through the vapor of their own breath. A faint humming fills the air from the ventilation ducts. The only sound of life comes from a clock ticking above the door, seconds measured against an invisible threshold. Maddison sits. The scientist in charge, a civilian with rimless glasses and an accent shaped by Cambridge, explains calmly, they will apply a harmless liquid to his skin to observe minor irritation. The drop will be small, no more than the size of a coin. He nods, signing again. The pen shakes slightly in his hand. He removes his tunic. Cold air touches his back. The assistant lifts a glass rod and dips it into a small vial marked HD. Mustard gas, though that word is never spoken aloud. A single yellow droplet lands on his arm, near the elbow crease. It glistens like oil. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the burning begins. At first, it is warmth, as though from the sun. Then it grows sharper, the sensation of fire crawling beneath the skin, of nerves igniting one by one. Maddison gasps. His eyes fill with tears that sting. The chemical begins to eat into the upper layers of flesh, releasing a smell like garlic and decaying rubber. The scientists take notes: time, temperature, pulse rate as he trembles, clutching his arm. No one moves to stop the reaction. This is procedure. Observation must be complete. A nurse watches from the corner, her face frozen. "It's all right, lad," she whispers, though her voice shakes. The liquid spreads. Blisters form. White at first, then yellow, swelling until they burst. Fluid runs down his arm, through the pain. Maddison hears a phrase repeated by the supervisor-controlled exposure. The words echo through the chamber like a prayer for justification. Hours later, he is moved to a ward, a room lined with iron beds, where others lie under gray blankets. Some have bandaged arms, others bandaged eyes. The air is heavy with the scent of antiseptic and burnt skin. Someone coughs, a deep rasping sound that does not end. One of the older soldiers, his face pocked with old scars, looks up at Maddison and murmurs, "You'll be right, mate." They said it's for the good of the country. His tone is dull, rehearsed, without conviction. In the corridor outside, the scientists write their reports. Subject experienced severe dermal reaction. Symptoms consistent with sulfur mustard exposure. Psychological state distressed but coherent. The document is stamped with a single word, confidential. Night falls over Porton Down. The compound lights flicker against the fog, illuminating the watchtower and the wire fence glinting with dew. Inside the ward, Maddison cannot sleep. The pain radiates through his chest now, sharp and deep. He whispers for water. His breathing grows shallow, irregular. At 3:45 a.m., A nurse checks his pulse. It is fading. A doctor is called. The smell in the room is unbearable, now chemical, human, tragic. The doctor looks at the chart, then at the body, then back at the door. No one speaks. By dawn, the report is ready. Accidental asphyxiation due to chemical exposure. No mention of mustard gas, no mention of experiment. His parents are told it was an unfortunate training incident. They are given a sealed coffin and an official apology signed by the Ministry of Defense. Outside, the mist lifts from the hills of Wiltshire. Birds sing again. Inside the fence, another group of volunteers gathers in the corridor, holding their consent forms. The experiments continue. The next morning, the Porton Down facility hums with the same mechanical precision as always. The corridor where Ronald Maddison once walked is scrubbed clean, his name already fading from the day's logs. The vial marked HD is returned to its cabinet. New bottles are opened BZ, CS, VX acronyms, spoken like passwords among men who never question the weight of what they hold. Down the hall, a chemical engineer named Dr. William Anderson adjusts his gloves. He has worked here since 1948 through years of rationing and rebuilding. He believes, or tells himself, that Britain must never again be unprepared. Defense through deterrence. The memo on his desk reads, "But every deterrent needs data, and data needs bodies." The next subject arrives at 0900 hours. He's young, 19, a farmhand from Kent. He volunteered after seeing a notice promising harmless tests and additional pay. In his pocket, a crumpled note from his mother. Don't forget to write. They call it Test 223, part of an ongoing series to measure the psychological effects of exposure. He is led into a sealed chamber, concrete walls, glass observation window, a single metal chair in the center. The room smells faintly of oil and chlorine. Through a speaker, a voice instructs him to sit still. A faint hiss follows. The air grows thick, acrid. Within seconds, his eyes water. His lungs seize. He coughs uncontrollably. Panic flares as he claws at the chair's armrest. The men behind the glass observe, expressionless, writing notes as he gasps. Mild respiratory distress, increased heart rate, loss of coordination. He is left there for 3 minutes, then 4. When they finally open the door, he collapses into their arms, retching. His skin shines with sweat. His vision blurred. The assistant offers him a cloth. "Good man," she says softly. "You've done your part." He's taken to a small room, given tea and 2 biscuits, and told to rest. No one explains what he inhaled. The scientists label it simply CS2 variant. Outside the chamber, Dr. Anderson writes the conclusion. Exposure within controlled limits, subject remained responsive. Another test complete. Another set of data points toward perfecting the next generation of crowd control agents. By 1955, Porton Down had processed over 10,000 servicemen under similar conditions. Some were exposed to nerve agents so new that even the staff didn't yet understand their full toxicity. Sarin, VX, tabun. The air of the compound shimmered with ghosts invisible to the naked eye, each molecule capable of killing in seconds. Each experiment justified in the language of prevention. There were safety protocols, at least on paper. Gas masks, neutralizing showers, medical supervision. But in practice, oversight was sparse, and the Ministry of Defense demanded results faster than conscience could intervene. The same report phrases appeared again and again: minor irritation, temporary effects, voluntary participation. In the evenings, the staff gathered at the canteen. Laughter echoed against the concrete walls, spoons clinking in metal cups. Some spoke of cricket, others of holidays by the sea. Only rarely did the conversation drift toward what lay behind the locked doors. When it did, someone would say, "Better us than them. If we don't, the Soviets will." And the laughter would resume, thinner now, but enough to fill the silence. Meanwhile, across the corridor, another wing of the complex ran animal trials. Monkeys in restraints, pigs sedated, rabbits placed in chambers where invisible death tested its reach. Each night, the technicians wrote successful trial, then buried the remains in lime-soaked soil. In the archives of Porton Down, the experiments multiplied. Trial N86, 1956, human skin exposure to diluted lewisite. Trial P37, 1957, ingestion of nerve agent antidotes. Trial V12, 1958, aerosol distribution tests in simulated field environments. The paper trail was perfect, clean, sanitized. But outside those gates, stories began to leak. A few discharged soldiers spoke of strange burns, memory loss, nightmares that smelled faintly of gas. Their claims were dismissed as exaggerations, rumors, misunderstandings of procedure. The government assured the public that all Porton Down operations were strictly defensive. Yet in 1958, a letter arrived at the ministry from a former technician, unsigned, typewritten, and stamped only with the words, "What we are doing here cannot be undone." It was filed away and never seen again. In the laboratory that same week, Dr. Anderson stood before a new batch of vials, labeled Project 112 Nerve Transmission Studies. He paused before uncapping the first bottle. Through the window, the Wiltshire hills glowed under a pale sun, quiet and indifferent. He thought briefly of Maddison, of that morning 5 years ago. Then he turned back to his work. The 1960s arrived quietly at Porton Down, but the world outside was changing. Across the Atlantic, in the jungles of Vietnam, American forces began using chemical defoliants, and whispers of moral reckoning drifted across laboratories in the West. Yet behind the fences of Wiltshire, the routine persisted: white coats, gas chambers, sealed reports. In May 1963, Corporal Thomas Harding arrived at the facility under a veil of secrecy. He was told he would be testing protective gear. The phrasing was familiar: clean, bureaucratic, safe. Harding had served in Cyprus and Aden, where he had seen what gas could do to lungs and eyes, but this felt different. Controlled, British, scientific. They placed him in a small chamber painted gray. The light inside buzzed softly. A transparent mask covered his face, connected to a breathing tube. Through the window, technicians in full suits adjusted valves and read dials. "Ready when you are," a voice said. Harding nodded. The hiss came again, the same hiss that haunted every corridor in Porton Down. His vision blurred slightly as an odorless mist filled the air. For 20 seconds, nothing. Then nausea. Then terror. His muscles stiffened. His chest convulsed. The room spun violently, and he felt his heartbeat double, then triple, pounding against his skull. He tried to speak, but the mask muffled his cries. Behind the glass, pens scribbled furiously. Data captured. Response times. Motor failure. Blood pressure. Harding collapsed. When they dragged him out, he was drenched in sweat, pupils dilated, body trembling. The medical team injected him with atropine, the standard antidote for nerve agents. Slowly, his breathing steadied. He would live. But the tremors in his hands would never leave. That night, as he lay in a ward that smelled of iodine and metal, Harding heard the muffled voice of another patient behind the curtain. They said mine was just smoke, the man whispered. Then I couldn't see for 2 days. The ward fell silent. Only the hum of the ventilation system filled the dark. By the mid-1960s, reports from Porton Down were beginning to pile up. Internal memos described incidents of acute distress and psychological disturbances post-exposure, but each one ended with the same signature: no evidence of long-term harm. Recommend continuation. The justification remained constant. Britain must understand chemical weapons to defend against them. In the logic of Cold War science, suffering became data. Agony became necessary. The men who collapsed, who vomited, who burned, were footnotes in progress. Dr. Anderson, now gray-haired and weary, had stopped believing in the word defense, yet he stayed, out of duty, or guilt, or perhaps both. His wife once asked him what he actually did in that place. He looked at her, long and silent, and said, "We make sure others die before we do." She never asked again. In 1968, another classified memo circulated, Operation DICE. It proposed testing the spread of biological simulants over the British coastline. Harmless. They said bacterial clouds of low virulence. Ships released plumes off Dorset and the Isle of Wight, while sensors measured how far the wind would carry them. Fishermen reported strange illnesses that summer: coughing, fatigue, skin rashes, but no one connected it to anything real. The ministry called it unfounded speculation. Meanwhile, a quiet revolt stirred within the base. A young technician named Peter H., recently recruited from the University of Leeds, began keeping his own notes, secret ones, written at night in a small ledger. He recorded times, dosages, reactions, the number of volunteers who left pale and shaking. He wrote the names that official reports erased: Maddison, Harding, unidentified subject, 1958. He wrote, too, the smells, that unmistakable tang of garlic and rot, the scent of flesh after contact with sulfur mustard. It doesn't leave the walls, he wrote, or the lungs. By 1970, rumors of a whistleblower began to spread. Investigators from the ministry visited Porton Down, their shoes polished, their questions polite. Anderson was called to brief them. All procedures are ethical, he said mechanically, and all volunteers informed. The investigators nodded, took their notes, and left. The silence resumed, but something had shifted. The younger scientists began asking questions about consent, about risk, about whether data could ever justify pain. A few resigned quietly. Others stayed, haunted by curiosity and fear. On cold mornings, mist still rose over the Wiltshire hills. Sheep grazed not far from the perimeter fence. Villagers in the nearby town of Salisbury saw the distant towers and wondered what went on inside. Some said it was where the government made antidotes. Others whispered about plague and poison. No one really knew. Inside, the work went on. Vials were opened. Records were sealed. And in a forgotten locker room, Peter H.'s notebook remained hidden, wrapped in wax paper, buried behind a row of gas masks, a testimony waiting to be found. June 1982, Porton Down. The same corridors, the same sterile walls, but the Cold War's shadow had begun to thin. The laboratory no longer pulsed with urgency. It throbbed instead with secrecy. Files from the 1950s and 60s gathered dust in iron cabinets marked, "Classified, do not remove." Most of the men who once filled these halls were gone, retired, transferred, or buried. Yet the ghosts remained, embedded in the concrete like stains that no detergent could wash away. That summer, during a scheduled refit of an unused locker room in Block C, a contractor pried loose a rusted ventilation panel. Inside, wrapped in a decaying wax cloth, he found it a small, leather-bound notebook its edges blackened with mold. The first page marked simply, "Private Record, 1957-1970. The foreman handed it to security. The security officer, unsure what to do, passed it to the archives office. There it sat, unopened. For several weeks until a mid-level official named Margaret Litton, recently transferred from the Ministry of Defense, decided to read it. She began that night, alone in her office. The entries were meticulous. Dates, test codes, initials, notes on exposure levels, physical symptoms, sometimes a single word, convulsions. Other times, long passages of anguish written by a man who no longer believed in his own work. April 1963, subject Harding collapsed within 2 minutes. Dr. A. observed without intervention. Post-exposure tremor persistent. No acknowledgement in report. September 1965, subject 42 died, 12 hours post-trial. File ordered destroyed. I copied it here. We are not defending anyone. We are recording how long it takes a man to stop moving. Litton stopped reading halfway through. The words pressed down like a physical weight. Outside, rain struck the window in soft, rhythmic taps, like the tick of a stopwatch counting years of silence. The next morning, she took the notebook to her superior. He read 3 lines, then snapped it shut. This never existed, he said, but it's evidence. She replied, it's contamination. He corrected, destroy it. Instead, she kept it, hidden, just as it had been before. But something inside her changed, a slow corrosion of trust. The way acid eats through metal one layer at a time. In 1989, Porton Down found itself under scrutiny, again the result of a small news story about a classified experiment involving servicemen in the 1950s. The report named Ronald Maddison. His family, who had received silence for 35 years, demanded answers. The ministry promised an internal review. For months, nothing happened. Then, a journalist, a wiry man named Roger Allen from The Guardian, received an anonymous envelope. Inside a photocopy of several pages from the lost ledger. The handwriting was cramped, nervous, precise. The last entry read, "One day, they'll dig us up not for truth, but for proof, and they'll find it all the same." The article broke on a quiet Thursday in September 1990. Human experiments at Porton Down soldiers' death covered up. It ran 3 columns long, with quotes from veterans describing the volunteer program. Their accounts matched the ledger's notes exactly. Within weeks, the Ministry of Defense launched what it called a limited inquiry. Officials spoke in the language of distant alleged incidents, historical context, unverified procedures. But the truth was no longer buried. Former soldiers began to come forward, men in their 60s now, their hands still shaking, lungs scarred, vision blurred. One recalled being told he was testing gas masks, only to wake in hospital blistered and coughing blood. Another remembered the smell. You don't forget that smell like onions and metal. It gets in your teeth. Television crews gathered outside the perimeter fence of Porton Down, their microphones catching the hum of the distant generators. For the first time, the public saw the compound not as a fortress of defense, but as an island of secrets, a place where invisible wars had been waged on the bodies of Britain's own sons. Margaret Litton watched the news that night from her flat in Salisbury. She never revealed that the ledger had passed through her hands, but she recognized the handwriting instantly. Peter H., the young technician who had resigned in 1970 and disappeared. She looked down at her desk drawer, where the original book still lay, wrapped in a plain brown envelope. For years she had been unable to destroy it, though she never dared show it either. Now, she opened it again. The ink had faded, but the words remained. We thought we were saving lives. We were measuring death. Outside, the fog rolled across the hills, swallowing the lights of Porton Down in gray silence. A gray morning over Wiltshire. Rain drifts sideways in sheets, soaking the grass that hides the buried pipes of Porton Down. The air hums with the low resonance of generators and the distant metallic clatter of a lab door slamming shut. The old facility, now officially renamed the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, still operates under a familiar creed. Secrecy is stability, but the silence is cracking. After decades of quiet, a coronial inquest into the death of leading aircraftman Ronald George Maddison is finally reopened. His family gray-haired now, hands trembling as they hold his faded photograph sit in the Swindon coroner's court. The walls are bare except for the royal coat of arms. A reporter from the BBC adjusts his microphone. The coroner reads from the newly declassified files. His voice is flat, bureaucratic, but the words pierce through. Subject exposed to 200 milligrams of GD nerve agent Sarin during controlled experiment. May 6, 1953. There's a murmur in the courtroom. The officials at the defense table avoid eye contact. For years, the ministry had denied Maddison's exposure to lethal substances, claiming he participated voluntarily and without coercion. But the evidence now tells otherwise. Testimonies from scientists, once hidden behind non-disclosure agreements, begin to surface, their tone a blend of shame and self-preservation. Dr. Derek Woods, one of the last surviving researchers, takes the stand. His hair is white. His hands shake as he lifts the paper. "We didn't know how potent it was," he says softly. "The nerve agents were new. We thought small doses would be manageable." The prosecutor asks, "Did you know that Maddison was suffering?" A pause. "Yes, but orders were to continue the observation." The courtroom is silent except for the rain against the window. The inquest lasts months. Pages of reports, autopsy findings, lab notes, all painted the same picture: hundreds of servicemen exposed to poisons in the name of defensive research. Many had been told they were helping Britain develop cold remedies, not nerve gas resistance. Finally, on November 15, 2004, the coroner delivers the verdict. Leading aircraftman Ronald George Maddison died as a result of the application of a nerve agent in a non-therapeutic experiment. The cause of death: unlawful killing. It is the first official acknowledgement of human experimentation at Porton Down. Outside the courthouse, cameras flash. Journalists shout questions over the sound of rain. Maddison's sister, Margaret, speaks quietly into a microphone. "We were told for 50 years that it was an accident. It wasn't. It was murder behind a locked door." Her voice trembles, not with anger, but exhaustion, the sound of a family carrying half a century of silence. Back inside the facility, now heavily modernized and guarded, the response is immediate and cold. Statements are issued. Press releases cite ethical frameworks and a different era. Files are reclassified again for national security reasons. The language of secrecy folds neatly over the language of guilt. But the ghosts linger. Former volunteers continue to come forward. Through the early 2000s, around 20,000 men who passed through Porton Down from 1945 to 1989. Some seek compensation, others only recognition. Their symptoms vary: chronic skin lesions, respiratory collapse, nervous tremors, nightmares of choking. Many had lived their whole lives believing they were the only ones. The Porton Down Veteran Support Group is formed in 2005. They meet in rented halls, often over weak tea and too much silence. Some can barely hold their cups. On the table between them lie photocopies of their medical files, black lines censoring the truth that nearly killed them. One veteran, 73 years old, says, They told me I was helping test gear to stop Russian gas. I didn't know I was the gear. The phrase spreads among the survivors, a bitter emblem of what was taken from them. Meanwhile, the laboratories at Porton Down continue their work, now focusing on counter-bioterrorism and public health readiness. The rhetoric changes, the mission remains, new chemicals, new purposes, same fences. On some mornings, mist still curls over the fields like a pale chemical fog. The sheep graze, unaware of what's buried beneath. Locals avoid asking questions. They've learned that Porton Down answers none. At night, a single light burns in the archival wing where classified files sit sealed behind steel doors. Among them, Peter H.'s original ledger remains, now tagged as evidence item SAR-PD Con F73. No one reads it anymore. It exists, officially, but it is unread, forgotten. Again. And outside, the hills of Wiltshire lie quiet under the drizzle, the same silence that has covered this land since 1953, 70 years after Ronald Maddison's death. The gates of Porton Down still stand modernized, electrified, humming with quiet menace. The official plaques call it the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory. Visitors see sleek buildings, steel corridors, a campus of innovation. They do not see the shadows beneath. Inside, a journalist named Clara Weston, authorized for a heritage feature on Britain's scientific defense history, walks the corridors under escort. Her badge reads, Level 2 Clearance. The guide, polite and polished, recites practiced lines about advancements in biosafety and ethical oversight. The air smells of bleach and ozone. Every corner is rounded, every word rehearsed. But Clara has read the archives, or what fragments the Freedom of Information Act allowed her to see. She knows what Porton Down meant to thousands of men whose bodies became the canvas of British experimentation. She knows about the 20,000 volunteers, the hundreds of unacknowledged poisonings, the deaths folded neatly into footnotes labeled training incidents. When they reach the end of the corridor, she stops before a framed photograph, black and white, dated 1953. 5 young men in uniform, smiling uncertainly. A caption beneath reads Volunteer Chemical Test Subjects, Group 4B, no names. Her escort says they helped build the foundation of modern defense science. She nods, but she can see the reflection of her own face in the glass, layered over the ghosts of the men inside. Their smiles are stiff, their eyes uncertain, as though they knew even then that the photograph would outlive their truth. Later, in the facility archives, Clara requests access to historical files. The archivist hesitates but agrees to show declassified materials. He brings out a box marked 1952-1958 Human Volunteer Program. Inside, meticulously typed pages, dates, dosages, reactions, every word devoid of humanity. The first document reads, Subject 116, male, 20 years, exposure 200 milliliters Sarin GD, time to onset 2 minutes, symptoms convulsions, respiratory arrest, result fatal. Conclusion dosage exceeds safe threshold. The line spacing is perfect. No emotion, no hesitation, just an entry as if recording rainfall. Clara runs her fingers over the faded type. It feels cold, impersonal, like touching the skin of a machine. Then, at the bottom of the box, she finds a file that looks out of place, handwritten, uneven, bound with string. The title, Personal Notes Dr. W. Anderson. She reads the first page. For years I thought I was serving peace. But peace built on silence rots. I have measured pain in milligrams and seconds. And I have forgotten the sound of my own conscience. She keeps reading, each line slower than the last. The pages describe internal debates, quiet refusals, the slow death of empathy behind locked laboratory doors. Anderson had seen it all the moment when curiosity turned into cruelty, when patriotism became procedure. His final entry is dated December 1972. The gases don't kill instantly anymore. They linger. They cling to skin, to walls, to thought. We wash our hands, but the smell remains. Clara closes the file. Her guide clears his throat. "We don't usually show those," he says, smiling awkwardly. "Why keep them?" she asks. He shrugs. "History, I suppose. It's complicated." Outside, the afternoon sun breaks through the fog. Beyond the perimeter fence, the fields of Wiltshire stretch endlessly, indifferent as ever. For a moment, Clara imagines the earth itself breathing out the remnants of what was spilled here, the residue of experiments that never really ended, just changed form. When she returns to London, she begins writing her story, but halfway through, she stops. How do you describe something that was designed to be forgotten? The horror of Porton Down isn't in what it revealed. It's in what it erased. Weeks later, her article publishes The Island of Experiments, Britain's Hidden Chemical Trials. It is clinical, cautious, redacted by lawyers. Yet between the lines, readers sense something else. The weight of lives dissolved into vapor, into files, into silence. At the end of the piece, she quotes one surviving veteran. "They said we were volunteers, but no one volunteers for pain they can't understand." The public reacts briefly, outrage, disbelief, a week of headlines, and then the story fades, like everything else connected to Porton Down. But the truth, once unearthed, doesn't die. It lingers in whispers, in archives, in the faint chemical taste of the English air after rain. In a drawer in her flat, Clara keeps the photocopy of Anderson's final note. On sleepless nights, she reads it again. "We studied how long the body takes to forget pain. We never measured how long the mind remembers." Outside her window, London's lights flicker across the Thames, reflected in ripples like distorted glass. She closes the notebook, exhales, and whispers the final line to herself, the one that was never meant for print. The real experiment was silence. The story of Porton Down drifts through the British consciousness like a faint echo, a scandal half remembered, a wound never quite closed. For most, it is history now, archived under Cold War legacy. But for those who carry its residue in their blood, it is not history at all. It is still happening. In a modest home outside Liverpool, John Rainsford, age 87, sits at his kitchen table. His hands shake as he opens a brown envelope stamped Ministry of Defense, Personal Response Unit. Inside is the government's final verdict on his claim insufficient evidence to support causal link between symptoms and Porton Down testing. He reads it twice, then folds it neatly and slides it under the teacup, as if to keep the words from escaping. He was 19 when they told him he'd be helping to develop protective clothing. The gas chamber smelled faintly of garlic and oil. When the mist hit his skin, it felt like pins of fire burrowing inward. Days later, blisters erupted across his body. The medics gave him cream and silence. 70 years later, he still dreams of that burning. Sometimes he wakes coughing the taste of sulfur on his tongue, the faint ringing of alarms in his ears. His granddaughter, Emily, a university student in London, has been documenting his memories. She films him on her phone, gently coaxing the fragments out of him, the smells, the colors, the names. "It's all going to vanish if I don't get it right," she tells him. Her project, titled The Island of Experiments, grows into something larger, a documentary stitched from interviews, declassified files, and fragments of testimony. In her footage, the story is no longer just about war science. It is about what happens when a nation trades memory for security. In one interview, she reads her grandfather a line from Anderson's notes, the same line Clara Weston had published 2 years earlier. "We studied how long the body takes to forget pain." John smiles faintly. "It doesn't," he says. "It just learns to hide it." The documentary premieres quietly online in April 2025. It is minimalist, black and white, the way memory feels when stripped of excuses. There are no narrators, no reenactments, only voices over archival footage, soldiers coughing, doors sealing, the faint hiss of chemical dispersal. The screen fades to black between scenes, giving viewers space to breathe, to imagine. Clips begin circulating across social media. Hashtags emerge. Porton Down Truth. Human Experiments UK. Unlawful Killing. For a brief moment, the nation listens again. Parliament promises another review. But survivors know what that means. Another cycle of statements, condolences, silence. Yet something is different this time. Younger viewers, people Emily's age, begin asking questions. They search beyond the official websites, uncovering decades of forgotten documents. University forums light up with discussions of ethics, state secrecy, and scientific morality. Emily's voice narrates the film's closing line. Porton Down was never just a place. It was an idea that safety could be built on the suffering of those who could not refuse. Every nation has its Porton Down. Every silence, its laboratory. When the credits end, the screen fades to black. Then, in white letters, dedicated to Ronald Maddison, 1933-1953, and all who were told it was for their country. Across England, people watch in silence. Some remember the names from the headlines long ago. Others hear them for the first time. The image lingers afield in Wiltshire, mist rolling low over the grass, fences stretching toward the horizon. The truth is still fenced in, but the world outside the wire now knows where to look. Between 1945 and 1989, over 20,000 British servicemen were exposed to chemical and biological agents at Porton Down. Substances included mustard gas, sarin, and CS gas, each tested under the guise of defense research. Many participants were misled about the nature of the experiments. Some, like Ronald Maddison, lost their lives. The official inquiry in 2004 ruled Maddison's death as unlawful killing, but no prosecutions followed. The Ministry of Defense has since issued partial apologies and limited compensation to surviving volunteers. As of 2023, Porton Down remains operational under the DSTL, focusing on biodefense and infectious disease research. What endures, beyond the statistics, is the question that still echoes across the English hills. When a nation builds its safety on secrecy and pain, how many ghosts does it take before the walls remember? What are your thoughts on the British government's human experimentation program at Porton Down? Let us know in the comments section.